Okay, we are live and recording, so please, you can start, Shulinji.
Namaste. Greetings to all of you who have joined us from different parts of the world. Welcome you all to the second day of the study class by Brother Tim Boyd, our International President, the Theosophical Society. As we continue to go deep into the subject, personality and the inner life, tuning the soul's instrument. Let us recall the day one of the study in which Brother Tim Boyd explained the basis of personality, the bodies and essence of life, and many more aspects. Today, we will explore the subject more together. The format remains the same. There will be a 40 minutes lecture, 15 minutes break, and then we will assemble again at 7 p.m. Indian time for a question answer session and discussion. I request Brother Tim Boyd to invoke the universal prayer and start his lecture of today's study. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Silverlina. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Thank you. So at this point, the floor is mine, Silverlina? I guess it is. Well, all right. It's good to see so many of you back again today. I have to say, one of the ways that I gauge the effectiveness of a presentation is how much enjoyment I get from it. It's a little bit personal, but I have to say I very much enjoyed the feeling of flow that we had with us yesterday. It is something that's a little bit remarkable to me. It still is impressive to me that a virtual meeting such as this, where people are scattered around the world, looking at screens, can be as effective as it is. It's something wonderful. I have a good friend who does a lot of work with healing, and they used to teach healing of the type that Dora Kuntz inaugurated, therapeutic touch. So it's healing without touch. It's the transmission of energy. Prior to this pandemic, they were having classes together. And of course, in person, they were training. Pandemic made that impossible. And in talking with her recently, she was really rather astounded because she found that continuing these classes online, that still the effect of the healing energy was palpable, and that the sorts of healing changes took place even in a virtual setting. It's something that, in a sense, goes against what we are accustomed to, but it also tends to confirm what we should know, that time and space are very relative things, and that the energies of a higher or deeper nature are not bounded by walls or by spaces. So this is something that I'm very glad to the Indian section and to the theosophical world, really, to have responded to this pandemic in the manner that we have. Quite honestly, probably in the absence of a pandemic, it would have been 5 years or 6 or 7 years from now that we might have dragged our feet into this sort of virtual way of spreading and sharing. Often we think in terms of crises when they come upon us. Often our response is, woe is me, this is a terrible thing. But there's no such thing as a crisis that doesn't bring with it certain benefits. Actually, I think if we were quite honest about our own living and our own lives, the things that have deepened us the most, the experiences that we have had that have had the most profound impact upon us and have caused us to grow in ways that might have been unanticipated, have generally been experiences that are crises, losses of various types that we have lived through, come out the other side, and found ourselves enriched in a manner that would have been impossible otherwise. We wouldn't look to repeat that. All of the wisdom we might have gained, we wouldn't give anything to repeat it. But this is something about this process. And in a way, it deeply relates to our subject when we're talking about the personality. Yesterday, we talked about structural issues. Really, we just sort of clarified what it is we're talking about when we talk about the personality from the ageless wisdom perspective. So from the theosophical perspective, we're talking about something that has 4 primary aspects, which is that physical, dense body, its etheric or energetic counterpart, the emotional constitution, and then the mind, the mentality. So that's the structure that we defined yesterday that we are going to be talking about. That's what defines the personality from the ageless wisdom point of view. Today, I would like to talk not so much about structural matters, but I'd like to talk about functional issues. How does this personality express? How does it function? How are we impacted? What is our capacity to interact and to cultivate? Tomorrow, I would really like to talk about applications. So what can we do? This is sort of what it must boil down to. Otherwise, we come together for 3 days, we part having shared nothing more than ideas. Ideas have great value. They have all sorts of knowledge is valuable. But ideas in and of themselves don't get us where we want to go. Fundamental principle we talked about yesterday, and I want to go into in much more depth today, is this idea that every single being desires happiness. It's a truth that you can test. It's true no matter whether you apply it to an ant, to a cat, or to you and me. We all are searching for happiness. And in this search, we go down various avenues that actually often work against that very thing. But this is something that we are searching for. And so in this process, we have to be able to understand the basis of such a thing as happiness if we're really going to be clear about how we approach it. So tomorrow, I'd like to focus really on applications. And I'm hopeful, I have a couple of ideas that we can go down, a couple of avenues that we can go down. Obviously, because of our time, it won't be perhaps in the depth that might be preferable. But the fact is that want to talk always, my habit of speech, my habit of presenting is something that is really suited to my view, who I am. That's all that I really have to give. That's all any of us have to give. So in that process, I really would always prefer to speak in language that is relatively simple. The point to me of speaking, the point of communicating is to communicate. We're not here to impress each other. We are here, hopefully, with a sincere desire to deepen. And if that desire is sincere, then we can find avenues to deepen ourselves wherever we look. Today, I'm center screen. So hopefully in the things that we have to share, there will be something that will perhaps key something that you already have within you. And then it will be of value. And then this time together will have had some value. So let's talk a little bit about personality. Share a little quote with you from HPB. She was always talking about many things. She talked about personality. This particular quote is one that I like very much because it's very much a part of my experience as well. In talking about personality on one occasion, personality and the Theosophical Society, HPB made the comment that personality is the problem within the Theosophical Society, as it is everywhere. I like that very much. She was a person who, spent a relatively brief lifetime. I mean, she died at 60 years old. She spent a relatively brief lifetime with this entire life devoted to trying to transmit a certain truth, a certain vision of truth that she was charged with doing. And along that way, obviously, the focus of this transmission was to people, each of whom had a personality, much like we do. And so in that process, she found repeatedly that not only was she misunderstood, she was attacked, she was undermined, the whole host of things that personalities do. Very often people think that they feel much better when there's someone that they have their foot on. And so that's a source of a sense of security for certain personalities. But she experienced the range of that. And in her effort to try and talk about truth, everywhere it was blocked by just the basic functions of personality, not by evil, not by, anti-forces, but just by the fact that we are undeveloped people. And so the idea that we develop this tool that is our only tool for interacting in this world is something that becomes exceedingly important. So let's start the morning. I have yet another quote. This one I don't carry in my head. But this is from the first letter from Kutumi, the Mahatma letters. The first letter that he sent, and this was to Hume. This wasn't even one to Sinnett. Portion of that letter, really profound letter. So he says that every thought of man, and of course, man means all of us, but every thought of man upon being evolved passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity. I'm reading this quote because today I really do want to focus on analyzing our situation and analyzing the tools at hand. This specifically will emphasize the nature and importance of thought and the thought process. So every thought, upon being evolved, passes into the inner world and becomes an active entity by associating itself with one of the semi-intelligent forces of the kingdoms. We may get to that. It survives as an active intelligence. So every thought survives as an active intelligence, a creature of the mind's begetting for a longer or shorter period, according to the original intensity with which it is generated. So a good thought is perpetuated as an active and beneficent power, an evil one as a maleficent demon. And so this is the quote, that the part that I always remember that I like so much. And so man is continually peopling his current in space with a world of his own, crowded with the offsprings of his fancies, desires, impulses, and passions. A current which reacts upon any sensitive or nervous organization which comes into contact with it. There's more. The idea behind that quote to me, every single one of us is engaged in a conscious manner, or probably mostly in an unconscious manner, in this process of emitting a stream of thought. At every given moment, there is this, what was described as a current in space, which is flowing out from the minds of any living, breathing person. So the nature of that current, he described it as we are peopling it. So it's like we're populating this current that's sent out into the world. So the nature of the population that we are sending out on this current becomes something that's very, very important. Because not only does it react on us, in today's culture, I have a 20-some-year-old daughter, and so the music of today is not the music of my day. And a lot of the celebrities of the day are quite well known. When they travel, they have like a crew that travels with them. So there's always all these people with gold chains and, stuff that they're saying that I don't understand. But a crew, there's a crowd of people that are constantly traveling with them. Similarly, anyone who thinks develops this same crowd, and we bring it with us wherever we go, and we send it out from us. And this is something where we impact the world in ways that are positive, we could say, uplifting, or not. And generally, when we talk about thought, if we're really going to be quite honest, there are very few people who are doing any original thinking. Basically, we are recycling the thoughts of others. Someone tells us something, we just take it and spread it as news or as facts or as information, not often realizing that we also have the choice to stop it right there. We don't have to internalize these things. But this thought is something that is preeminent and is really the nature of the human being. So probably what we need to do when we go into this aspect of how do we cultivate the personality, we first need to understand the ways in which it behaves. Basically, we need to analyze our situation. There's an expression that the disease that is hidden cannot be cured. So the condition that we are subject to, or we allow ourselves to be subject to, so long as it operates beneath the level of our awareness, then we have no control. So the whole idea with this is to become aware. HPB, again, she described the basic issue that we suffer from as human beings. She described it as the heresy of separateness. They had a way with words back then that I think we've lost to some degree. The heresy of separateness. Heresy being, an opinion that is accepted, that is completely in opposition to, in this case, in opposition to reality. So we operate under this very fundamental assumption that we in this world are all completely separate entities. And the reason that we do that is quite clear. I mean, because every single thing we do from day to day confirms that we are separate. So how can we deny it? I mean, I'm sitting here talking, I'm saying things, but you're not saying those things. You're thinking things, but I'm not thinking those things. We're separate. I remember Rada Bernier made the comment one time that if I move my hand, your hand doesn't move. So again, there is this continual confirmation from everything that we see that in fact we are separate from one another and separate from everything else. And we operate based on that assumption. So at the root of this way of seeing the world that's where we really need to look. If HPB, the Mahatmas, the Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Krishna, if all of these people are correct, that this assumption of separation is inaccurate, what is it that we're missing that they see? And so in many ways, when we look at that, there is a certain fundamental aspect to our way of seeing that is pointed to again and again by all of these beings, of these people that we describe as wise. The fundamental aspect that we continually come up against is this word that is used. And again, we need to flesh out the word. But the word that comes up time and time again is that there is within us a certain fundamental ignorance. Ignorance. And this is something none of us like to be called ignorant. Whether it's the Mahatma calling us ignorant or whether it's, someone in the streets, it's something we don't respond to well. But the ignorance that they're speaking about is not of an insulting nature. When we use the word, we're always talking about if someone is ignorant, it means that basically they don't know something. If I know about banking and finance and someone else doesn't, they are ignorant of financial matters. Someone else might be ignorant about physics. That's how we use the word. That basically, when we say it, it means that someone does not know. This is not what's meant by the word coming out of the mouth of the Buddha or out of the mouth of enlightened sorts of beings. When they talk about ignorance, it's not knowing, it's wrong knowing. So the idea that they try to express is not that we don't know, we know a lot of things, and we pride ourselves on that. But we know things wrongly. The whole idea of Maya or illusion, and that this world is composed and seen through this veil of illusion, is the idea that everything we're looking at, we're seeing it wrongly. And the basis of that is that we see it as separate, isolated incidents. The example that's always given and I always end up sharing this because it clarifies. The example that's given is the example of a snake. It's an example that has its roots in India, and so it's one that spoke to India of the time when these things were being said. So the idea is that you're walking down a road, and up ahead in the middle of the road, ahead of you, you see a snake curled in the road, and you're walking toward it. So the normal response is that when you see that snake, that a fear or an aversion arises inside of us. And so in looking at that snake, all of the things of like defending ourselves, do we run, do we hesitate, all of that comes up because of what we see. So in this example, they say, and if you walk closer, as you get closer, you see that it's not a snake after all, it is in fact just a rope curled in the middle of the road. Then everything that was our previous response drops away. Because before, what we knew was wrong. But when we see rightly, then it's a completely different way of seeing. It's not a world in which we are fearful and afraid. It's a world in which we are just completely clear in what we see. So this is the example. Ignorance of a very fundamental type is what plagues us as human beings. And it's something that finds its deepest sort of rooting in this personality that we've been talking about. So the other day, they had, I think it was Portugal, had its 100th anniversary, Portuguese Theosophical Society. And they asked me to talk, and I talked about a subject similar to this. But, for the purposes of that, I came up with a little arithmetic. You could call it the arithmetic of personality and ignorance. But an equation. The equation was this: ignorance plus the desiring mind, kama manas, ignorance plus the desiring mind equals the human problem, or the problem of the personality. This fundamental state of wrong seeing with the addition of an agency in which it can impact the world around us, this desiring mind, this kama manas, is the root of the human problem and the problems of personality. So, we have to ask ourselves, what if that's true, first of all? As with anything that I'm saying, it doesn't have any value unless at some level you find that there's actually something correct about it. I would urge you, don't take anything that I'm saying for gospel. I'm simply sharing what appears to be true to me and what has borne itself out in my own experience, but you got to test it for yourself. So that's what makes it valuable then. But if any of this is true, what is it that we're to do? How is it that we are to interact with this? There's a wonderful poem. It's a little short poem, actually. There's a little short book that was one of the first books that was recommended to me to read when I first became aware that there was such a thing as theosophy. And I still return to it from time to time. It's a little book, a gentleman by the name of James Allen. He wrote it probably, I think it was in the end of the 19th century. It's a book that's been published all around the world. It's called As a Man Thinketh. It's based on a biblical quote, as a man thinketh. They've retranslated it and made it as a woman thinketh, because really it's just as we think is a better way of putting it. But there's a preface. In the preface to the book, he has a little poem that he says about the mind and about thought. And he says, mind is the master power that molds and makes. And man is mind, and evermore he takes the tool of thought, and shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. We think in secret, and it comes to pass. Environment is but our looking glass. It's a powerful idea in there. And in a sense, even though he was not a theosophist by name, it links very much with what we would describe as our understanding of theosophy. Yesterday, we spoke about what is the human being. What is a human being? And gave the example from the ageless wisdom perspective as expressed by HPB, that the human being is highest spirit and lowest matter linked by mind. So this linking agency of the mind is where our real work is to be done. So this thought and the use of thought is the most fundamental aspect of the function of mind. Thought has a whole range from what we could call very base sorts of thinking to very high abstract thinking. But this thought is what we're going to be looking at today. Again, we have to kind of do an analysis of the functioning of the personality. Probably as theosophists, very few of us are engaged in the practice of hunting animals, for instance. But, going way back in time, it's been something that's been closely associated with humanity for the longest time. Before there were all of the sorts of shipping networks that we have, where I can have a fresh apple that was grown in Chile in the middle of winter, people had to hunt for their food. And if you were a bad hunter, you ended up being very thin. You might not make it through the winter. But to be a good hunter required something. Just like to be a good gardener. You just don't throw a seed in the ground and, you get a wonderful crop. There's a certain sort of study. In the case of the hunter studies his quarry, studies what it is that he's hunting for. Because if he doesn't know its habits, he studies its habits, its cycles, the way it behaves, studies it very closely. And based on that study, the hunter is able to put himself in the pathway of what he's searching for. And, in the case of the hunter, bring it home as food. But in the case of us, we're talking really about studying the movements, the behaviors, the habits of personality, so that we can place ourselves in its path and direct it. This is what the point of our time together today is about. So I wanted to do just briefly, there are two very important functions of the mind that deeply influence our concepts of who we are and how we behave in this world. First one, just a brief gloss. Every one of us who can say I, each one of us have something that we would describe as our identity. Now, if you were to ask anyone who they are, who are you? Yeah, pretty much depending on who you're talking to. If it's a business setting, you would tell what your job is and, what your position in that is and how you do that work. But basically, we all have these identities, multiple identities. And you put them together, and in a way, that's what we would say, that's who I am. But, how do we arrive at these identities is what, we'd just like to go into. Because, again, this is the habit of the unillumined mind that we suffer from. So you take it back to the moment of birth. I use this example frequently because, again, it speaks to me. You take it back to the moment of birth. From the theosophical perspective, the ageless wisdom perspective, what's happening at birth is that a soul, which is without, personality, without body, enters into and begins to operate through this instrument of a newborn body. The soul doesn't have a nationality. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't have a favorite football team. It doesn't have any of those things. It is at the moment of birth, the very first thing that happens. It happened to all of us. As soon as we come into the world, we're examined, and then it's pronounced what our gender is. So, depending on your biology, you're a boy or you're a girl. This is the first imprint of identity. From that moment forward, regardless of your inner feelings, there are certain ways in which you must behave if you're to fit into whatever your social or cultural setting is. So, a young boy who finds that he's very much attracted to dolls and loves color pink more than he loves color blue, this is in the United States or European countries, will be seen as somewhat maybe off from what is required of the gender, which has nothing to do with the soul. So this is the first level of identity. You get a family name. Everybody's family has histories. And so, the things that this family likes is what you gotta like. Depending on the country that you're born in, the family that you're born in will determine the level at which you will be able to work or function in that society, whether you will be poor or whether you will be rich, whether you will hold your head down when someone talks to you or whether you'll look them in the eye, determined by your family name. You get a religion, you get you know the drill. Identity after identity after identity is imprinted on this newborn personality. And so initially, for the soul who is attempting to experience the world through this new body, the process is one of the culture and the outer world saying, you are a boy. You are from this family. This is your religion. This is your nationality. So it's an outward impulse of being imprinted. But there comes a point as we grow into this world where this process changes. And at a certain point, we find ourselves not being told who we are. We find ourselves saying, this is who I am. This identity becomes a process now of internalization and expression. We have accepted and we behave accordingly. This is purely a matter of the personality again, the shaping of the personality. So then we respond to each other on the basis of these accepted identities. So, a while back, the United States was at war in various different places. I'm from the United States. So they're fighting against people in Vietnam. So as a soul that was born into a body in the United States, it was deemed correct and appropriate to travel to Vietnam to fight against other souls that were born into bodies in that place, because this is what Americans do. This is what Vietnamese do. And so it perpetuates, it becomes even a matter of honor, patriotism, all the words that are used to justify this level of what in other circumstances would be called murder. Identity and the imprint of these artificial identities, which feed into this whole idea of the heresy of separateness that was described initially. So if the process stopped at that, that would be enough, but it doesn't. Because at a certain point, not only are we told this is who we are, not only do we state this is who I am, but at a certain point, we want to magnify this identity. We don't just want to be a theosophist. We want to be a good theosophist, a great theosophist. We don't just want to be a business person. We want to be known in the business world. We don't just want to be successful. We want to have a building named after us, when we're long dead and gone. We seek to magnify and imprint this personality, this identity on the world. This is a process. And again, I just describe it. It's a universal process, but we need to, just like the hunter does, we need to be aware of the habits of this created identity and the way that it moves, so that we can choose whether, in fact, this is something appropriate for us. As I said, tomorrow we will talk about ways of perhaps interrupting this process, redirecting it. But there's no use even talking about it unless we actually see it. Another example. So this is identity. Another example of the workings of the mind and the opportunities for liberation from wrong workings. Let's talk about, again, this very, very fundamental thing of happiness, what everybody wants and searches for. Probably when we are happy, we all know when we're feeling happy. And it's something that we can say, I am happy now. But if you were to ask, what is happiness? We might be at a loss to describe it, but let's just look at it just a little bit, because I think it also might illustrate something for us. Little book by Krishnamurti, At the Feet of the Master, first book that he produced, which is actually sort of a restatement of the Viveka Chudamani by Shankara. But he lists these four qualifications basically that open us to actually intelligently interact with a path that is spiritual. Four qualifications being discrimination, desirelessness, good conduct, love. I just want to talk about the second of those qualifications, desirelessness. in that little book, Krishnamurti, he was 12 and 13 years old at that time, makes the point that this qualification of the four, this qualification is probably the most difficult for us, desirelessness. Because I think the point is that we associate who we are with what we desire. And the idea of being without desires is also would be, well, who am I if there's nothing impelling me to act in this world? But I think let's take a look. There is a linkage between desire, desirelessness, and happiness. So, what is a desire? And my definition is that a desire is thought in search of a sensation or of a feeling. Desire is thought in the activity of searching for feeling or sensation. So let's just look at it just briefly. What is a desire? So basically, we have these physical senses. And the physical senses are pretty much our windows on the world. So, there are 5 of them. In yoga philosophy, they talk about them as the yanandriyas, the organs of knowledge. So we have touch, we have taste, sight, hearing, and I'm sure I'm forgetting touch, taste, sight, hearing, smell. So the organs of knowledge are nose, tongue, touch or skin, and eyes and ears. So what happens when a sensation, whether it's touch, we touch something. When we touch something, basically we experience this thing that we call a sensation. It feels warm, it feels cold, it feels rough, it feels smooth. So this sensation is something that is transmitted to consciousness, and it's a neutral thing. The fact that we touch something that's cool doesn't make a difference to us. But at that phase, it's neutral. But then there's also the experience of pleasure or pain that comes with this. So we touch something that's very cool, or we see a color that's very soothing to us. It becomes a pleasurable experience. Or we touch something that's too hot, we recoil, and it's a painful experience. Still, that's really just on the level of information. It's neutral. But then something happens that shifts, it changes this experience. What was previously just a sensation, soon we find that the pleasurable sensations are ones that we become attached to. We want more. Sometimes kids taste sugar and they just can't get enough of it. They want more and more candy. So pleasure and then the painful ones we want to run away from, push them away from us. And so at this point, what was previously neutral now becomes colored by preference. Attachment and aversion is what it's spoken as. So as far as the personality is concerned, it's only at this point that it becomes a desire, because at this point, the mind becomes active in seeking out all of those experiences that are pleasurable and moving away from or pushing back all of those experiences that are painful. Attachment and aversion, the activity of the mind in search of those, is what constitutes a desire. So when is it that we're actually happy? You know, we have a desire for the corner office job. We have a desire to be complimented by someone. We have a desire for a particular food that we like. When we get that food, when we eat that food, for a moment, the pressure of this desire subsides. We no longer desire the ice cream or the great job. We got it. And in that moment, when desire subsides, the experience that we describe as happiness arises. Again, it tends to be momentary. And so for many people, to experience happiness, they feel they almost have to magnify desires, because it's only when the desire is satisfied that happiness arises. And you get caught into, again, this cycle that takes you nowhere repeatedly and fast. So happiness arises at the moment when our physical, emotional, and mental nature, our personality, is not consumed by the search to satisfy desire. Another way it could be said is happiness occurs at those moments when thought of and obsession with the needs and desires of this separated self subside. It's a glimpse into a deeper possibility. Happiness in and of itself, I mean, for most people, it's a goal, just to be continuously happy. But probably we would do ourselves more good if we were able to regard it, happiness, as a symptom of something deeper, a symptom of a momentary experience of freedom. Freedom from the consuming aspect of desire, but just freedom. And so this is a possibility for us in interacting with this personality. But again, if you don't see it, you can't do anything with it. You can hear as many people as you want talk about it, tell you about methods, techniques, approaches, but until it's seen, it only becomes, it's sort of like a conceptual aspect of your experience, experienced at the level of intellect, but not experienced at the level of actuality. What we're striving toward is actual experience. There's a simple little mantra. May I see what I see. It's so simple that it will surely be overlooked. May I see what I see. When we talk about ignorance, ignorance by its very nature sees quite clearly, but it doesn't see what it sees. It sees the snake when it's the rope. So again, today, I mean, for our purposes today, I want to try and be respectful of time, but we've got a big subject. But for the purposes of our talking today, I'm just really asking us, inviting us to consider these things. Look at it for yourself. see if there is something about this process of identity creation that we are involved in, that we can actually get a handle on. If you can grab a thread, that whole incorrect garment can come undone. If you can grab a thread. If you can understand something deeper about the nature of desirelessness, happiness, no self, and this process, this interlinked process, then we can grab that thread and this whole thing comes undone. There's an expression in Buddhism that it talks about the value of doubt. That at the moment we get to the point, we may not see clearly, the unreality of our way of looking at the world. We may not see clearly the emptiness or the absence of, substantiality of anything that we're looking at. But if for whatever reason, somehow in our minds, there is a seed of doubt that maybe what I'm seeing is not correct. Maybe what I'm being told is not wisdom or reality. That little seed will push us into a deeper and deeper exploration. The problem, I can tell you, is this, that once that seed takes root, you're in trouble. You're in trouble in the sense that the problem with seeing something is that you can't unsee it. Once you get that first glimpse of what's behind the veil, you can't unsee what you have seen. And then either you commit to go ahead or you commit to really a half-life that is filled with dissatisfaction. So I say all of that in order that you gauge it by your own sincerity and intensity. But if it's something that is just sort of a interest to you, don't go down that road. Wait until it's something that you find is really suitable to you. But if you do, then, the sorts of advices and things that have been told by those who have walked all the way to its end await each and every one of us. It's a glorious pathway, but it's not without its demands and its problems. So anyway, probably I should stop there because there's more to life than me talking. Let me turn it over to Survalina.
Thank you so much, brother, for sharing such wonderful insights on how personalities operate, the basis of behaviors, responding to situations. Well, my personal takeaway from this session is ignorance plus desiring mind is equal to problem of the personality. Quite a good linear equation. And incorrect identity leading to sense of separateness, which you talked about, is something we need to look at seriously and be aware of our habits. And the best part, I like this, happiness that you explained so well is something that we all look forward to, is a choice, we know that. And probably for those who really mean it, happiness is a habit for them. So we will have a 15 minutes break now. If you have questions, please write in the chat box, which we will take up. Or you may raise your hand if you wish to voice your question. In this 15 minutes break, I think Shikharji is planning to play 3 videos, Theosophical Society logo and the meaning, pictures from TS Varanasi and Bhuwali, and some clippings or videos from TOS India. So over to Shikharji, and let us wait for 15 minutes to assemble back and take up our Q&A and discussion sessions. Thank you all. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. So I think in 1 or 2 minutes, we're going to start the question answer sessions. However, there were 2 questions which were remaining from the yesterday's study. I would just call out the names, Brother Carlos Perez and Sister Georgina Teles. If you both are here, you may start your question. If you wish to voice your question, you can come on video when we start, or you could put it in the chat box. I will read out the question for you, whatever way you feel comfortable. Brother Carlos Perez and Sister Georgina Teles, they had asked 2 questions. So you may proceed, and after that, I will read out the questions.
Thank you, Sister Suralina. But this morning, I prefer to remain quiet because Tim has said everything at all. I don't have any question. I have nothing to say, but thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So your question is answered, right?
Yes.
That's a nice. And may I go to Georgina Teles?
Yes,
I am Georgina Telles.
Okay, maybe I could not read out the name. Okay, so I'm hearing out to Carlos Perez then. Okay.
okay, thank you. My question was regarding the relationship between inner self and personality that Tim talked yesterday about. And I trying, if possible, or my question is if it is possible to compare with the relationship between a boss and employees of a team, because the boss expect that some work is done in behalf of the company, of the entity, and we can see the relationship from the boss point of view or the employee's point of view. What do you think, Tim? Do you think it's a good comparison or not?
Well, I think it's something that can work. Excuse me. As long as we're talking about not just a good boss, but a boss whose excellence and enlightenment is such that it exceeds any bosses we've ever had. So, yeah, I mean, in a sense, there is the boss, but the problem in our case is that the boss is the one who is held captive by the worker. So in a sense, the personality constricts the authority of the soul. There is this connection, but in an average life, excuse me, in an average life, generally there is not enough in the nature of, we don't provide enough interest for the activities of this indwelling boss. And so then it has to go about doing other things until we actually become interested in doing the work for which it has connected itself with this team of workers that we call the personality. Just to work with that analogy. So yes, you could see it in that way. Boss in this case would probably be something very different than what we experience in the workplace, because it's not a matter of giving orders. When a personality is actually in tune with its inner nature, there are no orders to be given. There is simply the flow that occurs along the lines that are completely unforced and unimposed. It's, we talk about freedom, and we have this sort of relative idea about freedom. But when we're talking about the freedom that comes from a personal nature that is clear, that's open, It's like the freedom of light shining. There's no possibility to inhibit it. It's just you block it from its natural course. Once that ceases, the workers are really not doing anything. They're allowing everything to happen, but really they're not doing anything. They're just staying out of the way in a way. So the analogy of boss to worker works if we take these other things perhaps into consideration as well.
There is this question from a screen name admin. The question says, in yesterday's talk, you mentioned that before a person's death, his past life flashes before him. Why does this happen? And how long does it take? Hours or minutes?
Well, as far as the time frame, the time is a very relative thing. I know if you are in the boss and worker analogy, if a worker is called to the boss's office and he has to sit out there in the waiting room for a long period of time, all sorts of thoughts arise, and it might only be a minute, but it seems like he's been sitting there for an hour. When I was younger, I had a dog. I took him out to walk one evening, and without looking, I stepped out into the street. I was hit by a car. And I can remember, how long does it take to get hit by a car? A second? But I can remember turning, and when I realized I was about to be hit, the nature of the grill of the car, the lights that were in that car, everything about that moment seemed to be hours. It just seemed to slow down. So probably it took 5 or 10 seconds. Didn't even take that long. But it seemed like a very long time. So for these sorts of experiences between incarnation, really the time aspect is not what is important. It is the experience itself. The people I know who have had these near-death experiences, for some of them it happened in a period of, almost the blink of an eye. For some, they were in a coma and it was an extended period. But the important aspect of it is that all of the stored experience within the various aspects of the personality are released when there is no longer anything to bind it there. And then it is seen and then it is experienced.
Okay. I am seeing Brother Fernando Torres raising his hand, but please wait, brother. I'll just take up one more question from the chat box, then I'll come to you. There is Brother S. Raman who's writing, Brother Boyd, things of the world depend for their being upon some higher reality. The serpent points to the existence of the rope, and the dependence is one-sided. The disappearance of the rope means the disappearance of the serpent. The reverse doesn't hold good. Your views?
So the reverse being the disappearance of the serpent doesn't mean that the rope disappears. Well, probably this is one of those questions that, of a philosophical nature, that we could explore. I think for the purposes of what I have to offer, the broader point is what I would prefer to emphasize, which is the point that we have a manner of seeing things that, whether you call it Maya or whether you call it avidya or whatever the name is that we use, there's a way that we see that misinterprets reality. And the problem with many analogies is that they necessarily have limits because, as Brother Raman said, there's a higher reality that we are trying to point toward. And We have a maps, Theosophical Society, the Theosophy presents something very much like a map that can point us in a direction, but the map isn't the reality. The statement about ignorance or a rope or a snake, quite honestly, I have heard that analogy. And not being from an area, I grew up in New York City. And so you walk the streets of New York, you don't see snakes curled in the street. But still, I get it. You see other things. You see people who look like they might be dangerous, and then you find out they're not. So that's the snake in that instance. But we run into limitations. The idea of the analogy is to kind of point our attention in that direction, and then think it through for ourselves.
So I'll go to Brother Fernando. You may voice your question.
Thank you, Tim, for all this. This really I enjoying. My question is, what is the function of the Jiminy Cricket in all of us? And I mean, when you finally have suffered and you decide to trying to find what is your role in life, what direction to take, but suddenly you get distracted with this or with that, or with a passion or with this desire, and something happens. Then completely redirect and bring you back to your weak commitment. Who is that one? Who is making that call on your shoulder? And wait a minute. That is the question. Who is our Jiminy Cricket?
Yeah. And Jiminy Cricket, remind me, he's in which of the Disney movies is Jiminy Cricket
It's
in?
a Pinocchio. Pinocchio, the little boy that moves to be of wood to become of flesh.
Right. So the question is, what is it, even though we are obsessed with all of the various duties and activities involved in our normal life, even though we have a commitment to try and deepen our connection with truth, what is it that brings us back when we find ourselves becoming absorbed again in all of the activities that normally we think are so important? And probably, again, once we provide access within some aspect of our personality for this inner self to take some root, to have some expression, there's kind of a hold. There's a tentacle, there's something that has made connection with the personality. Again, these are analogies. But once that occurs, even though we may wander, even though we may do different things, the connection is there. And so long as our behavior isn't such that it's completely severed for a while, then there will be quiet moments when we become aware that there was something deeper we wanted to move toward, and we will be reminded. The other thing about the way life seems to organize itself is that there are always moments that arise that force us to be still, to be quiet. As much as we would like it to be otherwise, there's always something coming that disrupts our normal pattern, that throws us out of our normal way of being, and then suddenly we have to kind of center ourselves in some different environment. That is an opportunity. Anytime there is something that stills the activities of the normal life, then certain things arise. The big thing that stills it is, of course, the process of dying. We talked about that. Then everything arises. But in between, there are 1,000 little deaths that we experience, even that of going to sleep at night. Now, when we go to sleep, often we go to sleep consumed with thoughts. Many people go to sleep with the television on, consumed with somebody else's thoughts that they're hearing. But then also, there are depths of this sleeping process that we enter into. And very often there is deep sleep. And in that deep sleep, the activities of mind, the activities of the day are fully suspended. And we enter into that and we come back. And at the border of this deep sleep and awakening, very often there is a certain special type of consciousness that we become aware of. Most of the time it slips by us because it's so tenuous. And we generally are untuned to be aware of it. But one of the activities that we can in fact engage in is to try to become aware of that horizon moment between waking and between sleeping, and to be aware of what's imprinting itself, what is sort of whispering itself into the mind at that moment. And then, that provides a certain sort of food. It's a food that's really imported from the very deep recesses of our inner self and brought into the outer personality, if we can be aware of it. It happens every night, but every night we miss it until we start to try and tune ourselves a little bit differently. So I guess that might be part of the Jiminy Cricket.
Here I see a reminder from Kanchanji writing. We shall wait for the explanation for the question raised by Brother Shinde yesterday. Body wants energy, mind needs freedom, soul needs liberation. Are we doing it today or in tomorrow's session?
No, we can do it.
Okay.
Mr. Shinde, could you state the question again? I know body needs energy. I'd like to hear it from Shinde himself.
Yeah.
He said it well yesterday.
Yes. Unmute yourself.
You have to turn your microphone on.
Yes.
Yeah. I must thank very nicely you have explained today. And wonderfully you said, may I see what I see? That is really penetrated in my consciousness. May I see what I see? And when we think about the tools of the soul, of course, as you quoted, HPB said, highest is the spirit and the lowest is the matter, connecting the mind. That is what you mentioned. That, but when I see, may I see what I see? For that, my body needs energy and my mind needs freedom. You are very well explained. Freedom from all kind of desires, etc., etc. You explained very well. And I think mind needs freedom for that. And it is only we fulfill the need of the soul which wants to liberate. That's what the question actually. But now the question has come to my mind. We are connected with this, that when we think about the tools, then how do we connect our conscience? Conscience is more than mind, and it is always with the soul, life after life, epitome it is called. So when we think of this, then probably, as is said, who taps us? Don't do this, don't do that. And I think that is the conscience. It is also a tool, and that tool must
Professor Shinde, kindly unmute yourself, Professor Shinde ji.
Shinde, you're muted. Now you're not.
Okay.
So boil the question down for me, please.
Question is about the conscience.
Okay. All right. So consciousness.
Not
Also, let's put
consciousness. Not consciousness. Conscience.
the conscience. Okay. Conscience is the little voice telling you to do right instead of do wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So yesterday there was body needs energy, mind needs freedom, soul needs liberation, I think was what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Mind, we've covered that sufficiently for today.
Yes.
Body needs energy. All of these aspects of the personality are really placed in our care. It's placed in the care of the soul in many ways. So you have to attend to all of them, body, emotions, mind. Yesterday, we talked about the kind of dietary approach, which is to say what you feed. I do know people who have been who have become deeply involved in a spiritual path, who arrived there not by initially becoming acquainted with spiritual scriptures or teachers, but who arrived there simply because they felt they wanted to improve their bodies. And so people who changed their diet, and with a change in diet, the body became more energetic. With a more energetic body, it was able to do more things. Being able to do more things, it became really less of a concern for the other aspects of the personality. And so it freed up energy by this process of, we could call it purification. Similarly with the emotions, when they're linked in fear, when they're linked in lust, when they're linked in all of the various things that occupy so much of our attention, it's a sort of activity and nutrition that is heavy. And so it becomes attracted to those depths, and it lingers there so long as that's what it's composed of. As we take the efforts to cultivate different emotions, the focus that is on varying levels of what we understand as love or friendship or kindness. These are emotional qualities that then we think in terms of it being a purifying effect, a lightening. And again, the similar sort of thing happens. Mind, same thing. Soul liberation, the liberation of the soul in many ways, the soul doesn't require the same sorts of attentions as the other mind and emotions and body. The soul's liberation really is the liberation from having to try to force its vehicle to pay it some attention. The liberation from the karmic creation of circumstances that cause the mind to stop momentarily from some crisis, that then allows this higher voice to be heard. So that's the sort of liberation. The liberation, if you put a light under a basket, there is no liberation required for the light. It's shining as it always does, but it's impeded by this, the structures of this limited personality. If we make that more porous, make it more open, then, the soul or the light is not liberated, but it just shines more broadly. I don't think the soul is in need of liberation, would be my take on it. The voice of conscience, there is the idea that within each one of us, there is an understanding of what, we call it what's right and what's wrong. but probably the deeper understanding is an understanding of what is good, what is better, and what is best is what we try to cultivate. It is good to do no harm. It is better to be of a nature of understanding where you recognize that doing no harm links you closely with others. It is best to have a consciousness that is one of undivided oneness. But conscience functions at the level of what can be spoken to the personality. So that's something that we all have access to. Some more than others. I think we, to the extent that we have placed ourselves in some sort of communication with the soul, with the inner life, then it speaks more loudly and it speaks more clearly as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
true.
Shinde.
Loud and clear. That's what the conscience does to us. Very nice. I can see one sister Fatima asking for if she would be allowed to ask a question. Yes, you are allowed, ma'am. You could please put your question here, or you may come on video and ask your question if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, team. It's a great opportunity to be all together, and thank you to have this opportunity to meet theosophists from all over the world. So I'll try to, with my English, okay, to express myself. I apologize in advance. My question is, what is real in the personality? Has personality something of real? Is it only existing in the Maya? Once this freedom is achieved, when you are saying free from desire, free from the wrong identification, is there any personality left there? And my question is also like this kind of thing of the unity and at the same time, let's say all the different flavors or characteristics that we have, there must be, is there anything eternal in these differences? Yes, something like this. I don't know if it's more or less.
No, it's what you're asking is one of the big questions. That's not a little question. That's a big question. And, you know, in a way, it boils down to what is real. And, you know, is the personality real? And, you know, this is one of these things that there are all sorts of philosophical schools that approach this sort of thing. But the one that speaks most loudly to me is this idea that, yes, there is reality to the personality, but it's a relative reality. So, yes, if I stick my hand with a pin, I feel pain. That's real. It's not something that is just imaginary. So there is a reality to it, but in terms of an ultimate reality, no. It's the personality as is anything in the manifested world. HPB made this sort of statement, and maybe we'll consider it a little bit tomorrow, but she did this thing, a diagram of meditation. And in that, she said that one of the things that is a focus in this meditation practice is to come to the point where we have a perception in anything that is manifested. So anything that we can see, touch, feel, taste, think about, perception of limitation only. It's real, but it's real within certain limits. You take the example of the people like, you know, the Jesuses, the Buddhas, the Mahatmas. They have personalities, all of them. When you read the Mahatma letters, each of those Mahatmas has his own very distinct personality, different from the other. Yet these are people we described as realized, liberated individuals. But the personality still remains and is something that is used in this sense as a tool, something that we work through, something that we experience and we communicate with the world through. So yes, it's real. Yes, it is to be treasured, but it is not to become the center and focus of who we are. There is a deeper reality that functions through this relative reality. And that's kind of the way we experience it. So I hope that says something to the question. Don't try and discard the personality because you can't do it. Try and cultivate it so that it can then be in tune with another reality and an instrument for a deeper reality.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I can see one more question left in the chat box. Meanwhile, I would request Brother Shikhar or Brother Pradeep Mahapatra, whoever is tracking the YouTubers. I mean, if there is any question in the YouTube link, they might forward it here, or maybe they can voice it. So the last question in the chat box so far is from Raghurama Raoji from India. He writes, what is the interconnected aspect of nomenclature like soul, consciousness, spirit, all pervading energy?
What is the interconnected aspects in the nomenclature related to soul, consciousness, spirit, all pervading? Well, here's an example. There are these words. You say the word forest, and something comes to mind. Generally, it's something related to a lot of trees, greenery. You say the word ocean, and again, something vast comes to mind. And at a certain level of imagining the ocean, we see water, we see waves, we see a lot of things. You say the word God, and for many people, again, something vast comes to mind. Each of these, the nomenclature, describing these grand bodies which appear as trees, but then also, if our awareness goes deeper, there are animals that live within that. There are insects that feed on it. There are the roots that go into the soil. There is the growth that has been there. There is the endless ages of decay that has gone in and fed all. There's this interconnected cycle that is absolutely endless. Ocean is a similar thing. We can look at it as a lot of water, or we can look at it and see waves on its surface, but there is life of all sorts within it. And within it, we think of it as a body of water, but there are rivers running in different directions within the ocean, streams. So I think in a similar way, when we think about soul, consciousness, spirit, this is language that ideally should really expand our view. Soul is a link to a universal consciousness. It is the ray of that universal consciousness that is expressing through us, but its being and its connection is with something that is, you can't even use words like vast, because it's meaningless when we talk about universal consciousness. So I think these sorts of words are the best we can do at the moment to describe something that, if all of these people we think of as great, if they're correct, then the experience of what this word really means is something that is available to us if we can actually do what's required on our side. And the whole point of this particular workshop is that if the personality is properly attended to and acknowledged and recognized and understood, then it's not a matter of making a light shine, it's just a matter of removing the obstacles to its shining.
Thank you. I'm informed that there is no question from YouTube, and I don't see any more question in the chat. I don't see any raising hands. So the choice is yours, sir. How would you like to conclude? If you wish to make it a silent meditation or a guided meditation, no meditation, whatever way you want to conclude, sir.
Am I allowed to take advantage of any of the people who are participants?
Yes.
All right, she gave me permission. Fernando de Torrijos. I would like to close with a meditation. And today, in my authority, which has been given to me by Suvralina, you are going to conduct it. Blame her, don't blame me. You have to unmute.
Yes. Okay. To be in silence. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everyone from all over the planet in this moment. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sitting in a dignified posture, whatever that means to you. Noticing the feet on the ground. The buttocks on the cushion or the chair. Noticing how the spine is merging from the base up. And how the head is resting on the top of the spine. The shoulders are softened. The hands maybe are together on your lap, or perhaps placed over your thighs, whatever is more comfortable to you. Becoming fully aware of the physical body. Our home in this life. Giving thanks to the chair or the cushion in which we are sitting for giving us all the support that we need to be present in our own presence. Allowing a gentle expression to your face. and becoming aware of the breath. Becoming aware of this energy that moves through the body since the first day and will be with us until the last day. And that is always new, that is always fresh, and that is available without discrimination to everything that is alive. Noticing the in-breath as moves into the body and the sensation in the nostrils. Noticing the out-breath as moves out of the body. And the sensation. And noticing also the space, that moment of stillness in between the in-breath and the out-breath. And in between the out-breath and the in-breath. A simple moment of full stillness. Then open our awareness to the whole. Allowing the thinking mind to rest in the flow of the breath. No need to think. Only to be fully present in the beauty that is within you. And to finish this short meditation, I want to finish with some loving kindness. May I be safe. May you all be safe. May I be happy. May you all be happy. May I be healthy. May you all be healthy. May I be free from inner and outer danger. May you all be free from inner and outer danger. May my heart be filled with compassion and wisdom. May all your hearts in any corner of the planet be filled with compassion and wisdom for the good of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernando. At this point, I'll turn it over to Survalina to close the program.
Thank you all. It was a very thought-provoking second day session, I would say, after yesterday's introduction. And we all look forward to a very meaningful and wonderful closure of this study tomorrow. Our moderator would be Dr. Mansi Bhagat. She would be doing my job, what I was doing today. And we all look forward to see you all again, same day, not same day, same time tomorrow. And thank you all for joining us. Namaste.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste. Thank you, Timji. Namaste.
Okay, very good. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sir, we'll meet tomorrow at same time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Indian section. Thank you, Timji.